Continuing the discussion of puberty and changes related to puberty, let's talk about the brain. How does the brain change during adolescence or during puberty? Well, there are some key changes that are really going to be relevant to sort of the behavioral changes you see with puberty and adolescence. And so first of all, let's talk about the limbic system. The limbic system is connected to functions involving fear and emotional impulses. I might have mentioned the limbic system in previous videos. And the thing about the limbic system is it matures before another important part of the brain, and that's the prefrontal cortex. Remember, we've talked about the prefrontal cortex before. The prefrontal cortex is that part of the brain that has been maturing slowly, gradually, all through the lifespan so far. It is not fully mature until after adolescence, and it is responsible. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for things like executive control processes, impulse control, anticipation, planning, being able to control yourself, being able to regulate yourself. The limbic system matures before the prefrontal cortex. All right, that's going to be important. You are going to have emotional beings. It's not just the hormones that can explain the emotional nature of the adolescent. You're going to have emotional beings who do not yet fully have a completely mature prefrontal cortex that helps them regulate and control all of these emotions, which might be fueled by hormonal changes. And because things like testosterone, it increases things like aggression. Estrogen, linked to mood, fluctuations in estrogen during the menstrual cycle, linked to mood swings. That does not mean that you can disregard everything someone says as, well, that's just your hormones talking. You know, the feelings may be real even if hormones are contributing to the expression. And so we see this uneven timeline of the maturation of the limbic system versus the prefrontal cortex. And so the prefrontal cortex may actually be overwhelmed with impulses. So it can't handle all the new stuff that's going on. So with adolescents, particularly your early adolescents, they're feeling a lot and they don't know what to do with the feelings. And part of that can be explained by these differences in the brain. Now, another important aspect involves a part of the brain called the amygdala, which I think I might have mentioned previously as just as a general, oh, hey, sometimes we might talk about the amygdala. The amygdala is very much linked to emotional processes and functions. And the amygdala is directly affected by pubertal hormones. Those hormones have a direct impact on the amygdala. So this leads to this general result of being highly emotional, but not being able to regulate, to control, to know what to do with all those emotions, all those big feelings. Now, another key change has to do with biological rhythms or circadian rhythms. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but this is your sleep-wake or day-night cycle. Circadian rhythms has to do with when you feel sleepy, when you're ready to wake up. And circadian rhythms change with puberty. And this does not get nearly as much attention as it should, especially when schools are determining when to start middle school or high school. It'd be nice if they paid attention to what's the brain like of an adolescent. Will they be able to wake up that early with ease? Spoiler alert. No. All right. So circadian means about a day. So there's a 24-hour cycle that's your circadian rhythm. And because of genetics do influence your tendency to have evening or morning alertness. So you already have individual differences. You've heard of the terms, morning person, night person, all right? People have different tendencies. Sometimes you look within your family and you can see similarity in terms of what your preferences are. But puberty brings about certain changes too. And culture, expectations of what teenagers are expected to be doing, what devices are available in teens' lives nowadays. You may or may not have heard that like cell phones, laptop screens, they give off something called blue light, which can interfere. Light on the blue spectrum can interfere with the circadian rhythm. So that can add to everything else. But it's not just the phones. Even without the phones, even without the screens, there is this natural tendency. Adolescents will get sleepy fairly late in the day, and it's their natural tendency to want to wake up later in the morning than most people would anticipate. And most adolescents need about 9 hours of sleep a night. Do you think they're getting it? No, they are not. Not just because of the phones, not just because they're staying up trying to text their friends, not just because they have to stay up to do all that homework that they sometimes get assigned, but there is a mismatch between how schools are set up and part-time jobs and things like that are set up, and how extracurricular activities and whatnot, and the schedule that their body would prefer them to be on. So a lot of schools start very early in the morning. I know in my youth, I know this is back in the Stone Ages, but in my youth, my middle school started at 7:20 a.m. and my high school started at 7:15 a.m., I believe. Is that a good starting time? No, because ideally, a lot of adolescents would prefer to fall asleep around midnight and wake up around 9. Can you imagine school starting as late as 9? I mean, I know there are schools out there, but I know in my region where I'm teaching, a lot of students will tell me that they had those super early start times for a middle school or a high school. I always remember, like, whenever I'd see a teen TV show where the people are supposed to be in high school or middle school, and they're just lounging around having breakfast. I'm like, don't they have to get to school? School starts right when it starts to get daylight. Why are they just lounging around? Gilmore Girls, and Gilmore Girls has lots of issues. All right. In terms of how it realistically depicts adolescence and other issues. But one thing that always bothered me with the Gilmore Girls, because all sorts of people are like, you got to watch Gilmore Girls, check out this show. I know it's marketed towards younger people, because I was like in my 20s, I think, when it came out. But you got to watch this show. And I would watch it and I'd be like, they're just strolling around town in the morning. She has to get to high school. She has to take a bus to go to private high school in another town. And she's just strolling around, and she has time to go get breakfast at the diner. And that always confused me. I'm like, no, high school is a time where you wake up and you're like, oh crap, I got to get to school. And it's this immediate thing. And I was often going to school when it was dark out. So for me, that always seemed weird. I don't know about you, about your individual situations, but there are a lot of schools that are not set up to allow adolescents to have that schedule that they would prefer. A lot of teachers, they will report that their students are falling asleep in class, but they will interpret it as something with the student, like that student, they need to get themselves to bed earlier. Why? They don't take the class seriously. They're sleeping in class, and they will kind of completely discount the possibility, like, well, maybe this schedule is not working for them. Maybe high school should start later. I don't know if that ever is going to happen, but a lot of science backs up the utility of that if it could happen. So let's see, did I say everything? So sleep deprivation is very common among adolescents, and that's not a good thing, because sleep deprivation increases the risk of insomnia, not being able to fall asleep when you do get the chance, nightmares, mood disorders like depression, anxiety, conduct disorder, and very dangerously, once they are driving, falling asleep while driving. And all of that is more likely when you are sleep deprived. Many adolescents are sleep deprived as their norm, which is an alarming situation. All right, that's what I want you to know about brain changes related to puberty and adolescence.